Hello, and thank you for joining us for this industry spotlight, where we will discuss RoadSafe, a leader in the traffic management industry, and discuss the traffic management industry at large. My name is Ardis Tabb. I'm a senior banker in Baird's outsourced services practice, better known as FIRE. I am joined today by Dave Meirick, RoadSafe CEO and an industry veteran with over 35 years of traffic management experience. Dave, thank you very much for joining me today. How about we start by you telling us a bit about RoadSafe and your background?
Sure. Thanks, Ardis. Great to be here. Always great to talk with you. Well, my background really is in the traffic safety business. That's where I started really in 1987, back in Iowa, a very small business, just basically me and another guy and one truck. And, very quickly grew that business over the next 10 or 12 years and ended up selling that to what today is RoadSafe. So over the last, 25 years almost, been involved with a variety of private equity partners and sold the business 4 times in that span. Today, we're one of the largest traffic control and pavement marking providers in the country. We work really from coast to coast, from Canada to Mexico. We work in every state but Alaska and Hawaii. About 3,000 employees, about 2,000 trucks. The business is growing significantly. Our last transaction with Investcorp and Triatlantic, which was in April of 2021. And since that time, we've done 9 additional acquisitions. So we're on a cadence of about 1 a quarter, filling out the senior team and building the foundation for what we believe is going to be a $1 billion business very quickly. So very exciting times at RoadSafe. We'll talk about the industry and the market, but it's a good time for the traffic safety and pavement marking businesses.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that background. That's really helpful. Well, I think that's a great segue into my first question, just around the broader industry. From your perspective, how have the broader macroeconomic conditions impacted the traffic management industry?
Well, there's no doubt coming out of COVID, just, lots of things going on, especially the last 2 years around the inflationary pressures. We've seen a really difficult labor market. Backing up to COVID, though, as you're aware, and we've discussed in the past, our industry and our business specifically did very well through that 2-year period or so. In fact, we sold the business right in the midst of COVID. We launched and then completed that sale in April of 2021. So the industry has done well during downturns. If you go back to the last several of them, our industry really looks like it's a nice hedge. It chugs right along through those downturns. And again, in COVID, we proved that. But in terms of the macro, the last 2 years, let's say, really difficult labor environment, certainly in 21 and 22, especially in the pavement marking side, we saw pressure on pricing, raw material issues, a lot of those raw materials coming from overseas that just were difficult to get, transportation issues, and that showed up in the margins for sure. Fortunately, however, the top line in our business has been very strong, and we've been able to do really well despite the inflationary pressures.
Wonderful. What is it about the traffic management industry that allows the business or allows the industry to be so sustainable during these economic downturns?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a couple of components to that. Number one, and we absolutely saw this in COVID, a lot of our work, especially in the metro areas, a lot of our work is restricted to certain hours. So think about it as the non-high traffic times. The work is, if you think about the big cities that we work in, it's done in the evenings, it's done on the weekends, it's in non-rush hour times. And what we saw during COVID was that the agencies, city, county, states just said, you can go to work. There's not traffic out here. So we got a lot of work done. But also, I think highway, not traffic control specific, but highway spending in downturns is kind of looked at as a jobs act. Let's get people to work. In the infrastructure, civil infrastructure that we work in, that's a good place to get the economy kind of started again. And we've seen that several times.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, Dave, I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this next question here, just given how successful RoadSafe has been with acquisitions in the past. Can you talk a bit about the wave of consolidation that's been happening in the market and how you see it playing out over the years to come?
Yeah, it's been phenomenal, really. And again, I think RoadSafe is, as we exist today, is one of the leaders in terms of private equity investment in this space. We go back to really the late 90s, which was NES at the time, but very quickly sold to private equity, I think around 2003 or 4. And having gone through 4 transactions, we've seen the ups and downs of that. But if you go back, I think to even as recently as 2017 or 18, there were only a handful of private equity investments in the space, and you would know who they are. There's the folks that today are trading as AWP or Helix or InfraStripe, was just getting started at that time, and a few others, some of them smaller. But what we've seen since then is nearly 25 or 30 private equity investments in the space. And that's not including the add-on investments that folks like we've made, or AWP or Helix or the others. So as you know very well, because you track our industry and track us, lots and lots of industry really attracting private equity, and lots of folks I think that are still following our industry and wanting to get into the industry. And I think even in these times of some tougher credit markets, we're seeing a lot of interest in the traffic safety space and the pavement marking space. I think what makes RoadSafe different than most of the others is that we touch really the total addressable market in terms of pavement marking, traffic control, and some of the ancillary items out there, while the others generally have focused on one segment or the other. And that's fine. It's a different model for us. And we believe that we're best off really touching the whole thing. But yeah, the private equity investment, with my vision and what I think is going to happen over the next, let's call it 3 to 8 years, we'll start seeing some consolidation of the consolidators. We haven't seen it yet, or not very much. But if you think about the private equity firms that are involved here now, the getting towards the upper end of that middle market, with a lot of interest, and businesses are performing. And I think almost 30% of the total addressable market is in the hands of private equity today, but it's spread across 30 investments. There's just not been consolidation of the big guys. So when that happens, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very exciting. It's going to be a lot of work, but it will attract, larger, more sophisticated investors. We've seen that really over the last couple of decades.
And what do you think is driving companies to put themselves up for sale?
Well, it's interesting, and I'll give you a little anecdotal story here. I spend a lot of time with M&A and meeting with founders and sellers, and a lot of them are my friends from the years in the industry, or we have common friends. And until recently, I would go out and meet a target, and we'd talk about the business, and we'd get down to, hey, what is this going to look like? And people would say, Dave, how do you put a price on a company? How do you value my company? You don't really know much about our market, our state, or my business. How do you do that? So I'll explain that we really start with the financial statement, and we get to an EBITDA number and apply a multiple, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But today, when I go out and see folks, we order lunch or dinner, and we sit down, and they say, well, Dave, my business is doing X of EBITDA, and I want, so many times. They just understand that the brokers that are out there, the activity in the industry has really educated those sellers. And I think a couple of things, they all have friends now that have sold their businesses because there's been so much activity. And I think folks realize that if you went back to the late 90s, there was a pretty decent amount of activity. Some of those didn't work out so well, and some of those businesses aren't around anymore. And so there was a really pretty slow period over the next 10 years. And I think, the industry really grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So there's a lot of second generation folks out there, but there's never been the level of activity by private equity at the multiples that are being paid today. So people understand that there is an option other than to passing it along to my kids or selling it to my employees. And frankly, the way the market's working today, the purchase prices are just higher. So folks are willing to take advantage of that, I think. And that's great for RoadSafe. I think, we'll talk about the competitive nature of the transactions. And it's most common now that there's options. Some of the bigger deals have a full process, but even the smaller deals, they're getting called by brokers all the time. They're getting incoming, hey, I'm representing a big, public private equity held traffic company, and they'd like to talk to you. So that's happening every day. So folks are getting educated, and there's always an option for them. It's rare now to get a proprietary deal. We try to do that, and sometimes we can do that. But it's just changed. The world in traffic safety and pavement marking has just changed because of the activity around private equity. And I would say it's changed for the better. It was harder to do this when the sellers, first you have to convince them to sell the business, and then we have to convince them to sell it to RoadSafe. The first part of that is easier today than it has been in the past.
Terrific. Thank you very much for that response. What factors are having the greatest effect on the performance and the makeup of the industry?
Well, there are some things changing in the industry, and some of them are slight, and the public won't even notice them. But one example is on the pavement marking side, to really for the advance of driver-assisted vehicles, you're seeing a lot more 6-inch lines, for instance, rather than 4-inch lines. So that's a good thing for our industry. There's more technology coming into work zones. It's really not new technology necessarily. It's new to our industry. So you think about automated flagger devices. You think about we're using some technology that we refer to as smart work zones, license plate readers in a work zone, for instance. Things like that coming in. Those are all impacting the businesses. I think also the use of handheld technology for recording or tracking payroll, for instance, or for billing. That stuff's becoming more prevalent across the industry as well. So it's raising the bar a bit, I think. But it's all for the better. Our customers want timely billing and accurate billing. Same with payroll. So I think all those things, both on the sort of back office side of it, but also out on the roadway, there are a lot of those things changing that are adding a bit of complexity to the business. So I think that's all good, though.
Thank you. And so from the demand side, what do you see having kind of the greatest impact on the market?
Well, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was a big deal. Definitely, increased the federal spend at the state level, and it varies sort of from state to state, but it was significant. What's happening in reality, though, is that inflation is eating up a pretty good chunk of that. So the cost to pave a mile of road or put a sign up in the air or whatever it is that you're doing to stripe a mile of road, it's more. So the units of production haven't necessarily been linear to the increased dollar spend, but it has been impactful. And I think, like as we have talked, and private equity guys and investment bankers like to ask questions about, well, that's only a 5-year plan, Dave. What's going to happen at the end of that? I would tell you that the spending in infrastructure does not go backwards. Despite the IIJA and all the state and local funding that's been put into place, whether it's gas tax, toll roads, registration, user fees, despite all that, we're still not where we need to be in terms of getting the roads and bridges fixed. So I don't think we'll ever see sort of a regression back to the norm in terms of a big bill like this running out its timeline. I don't think, it will definitely sunset, but there's just not ever been a situation where it backed up. So this is not, I think, is not a, sort of a non-recurring spend. I believe that it'll just continue to build on that. So that's driving a lot. The infrastructure just needs fixing. That goes for not only the highways, but the utility infrastructure. The same situation. It's been underfunded. Some bad things have happened, and forced those that are controlling those entities to get them up to speed. So,
great. Thank you very much for your insights there. And lastly, if you were to look into your crystal ball, what's your outlook on the industry, where you see it headed, as you think about TAM growth, et cetera?
Well, I just am, I believe it's going to continue to grow. The funding is there, continue to be there. Really, the demand is there. The roads have to get fixed. The bridges have to get fixed. We'll see some changes with, I talked earlier about driver assist vehicles, talked about automated flaggers. I would love to see, and I think this will happen, hopefully sooner rather than later, that we don't have flaggers standing on the side of a 2-lane road next to live traffic. I mean, the technology is nearly there. Some would claim it is there to eliminate that, to take that worker out of harm's way. So I think our industry is pushing for that. There's certainly manufacturers that are pushing for that. I think certain DOTs go faster than others in terms of, approving new products, but that's going to happen. In terms of the industry and private equity, I think we're at a point now where we have critical mass. There have been a couple other attempts to consolidate this industry, and they have not succeeded for a variety of reasons. But this time, given the amount of investment that's already been made, and there's some really good companies with really good management teams out there that are private equity owned today. And I believe that when we get to seeing where we're consolidating consolidators, that it's going to be a good thing for the business. And it's happened in many industries, as you know. And I think this time we've got, I would say the right investors, got the right teams in place across these portfolio companies or platform companies. And if I'm a founder, family-owned business, I'd be very excited about that, because there are going to be continued opportunities to monetize your life's work and have a process and not have to, worry about selling it to a son or a daughter or a niece or nephew or to a group of employees. So it's a really good opportunity, I think, for founder-owned businesses.